made possible by the liberation of human mind, by the system of individual rights, you see the standard of living increase dramatically in Britain. The life expectancy rose significantly from the low 30s it was under the pre-capitalist system, and of course today it's still rising in the capitalist or semi-capitalist nations. For a girl born today in America in 2010, her life expectancy is 80. You know, my ex-wife was something of a geek. You know, she used to, I say that respectfully because I have a lot of respect for the Jew, but she used to say the internet is the greatest invention of our lifetime. And I would say, no, that's true. But there's something coming in the 21st century that's going to dwarf the internet by comparison. And that, of course, is biotech. Right? The biotech field is going to, with the ability to clone vital organs, is going to send the human life expectancy, at least in the capitalist and semi-capitalist nations, is going to send the human life expectancy into triple digits, and it's going to do it this century. And it's going to be, it's just going to be an extraordinary advance in the field of applied medicine. Now, Europe's population in the 19th century, during the heyday of capitalism, Europe's population more than triples. In Britain, the freest European nation, per capita living standards rose during the 19th century, while the population more than tripled. Think about that for us. That is extraordinary and historically unprecedented. The population more than tripled, but per capita living standards rose, which means, of course, that British production of consumer goods, of food, of clothing, of housing, etc., that British production of consumer goods had to more than triple in order for that to occur. These are historically unprecedented numbers. Now, for example, take real wages in Britain. Now, real wages, my PhD is in philosophy, not economics. But you know, when I talk to the economists, you know, they tell me the single most, if you want to judge a country's living standards, if you want one factor to look at, and only one, the single most important factor to judge a nation's wealth is real wages. Now, what that means is, in contrast to nominal, you know, name only or monetary wages, nominal wages or monetary wages is your income measured in terms of how much money you make. So, you know, if you make $10 an hour on a 40-hour work week, your monetary wage or your nominal wage is $400. Now, other things being equal, it's better to have a higher monetary wage than a lower monetary wage. But that point is enormously secondary in determining your living standards. Because you could make $5 million an hour, never mind, you know, $5 million an hour and be poor. How can that be? How can I make $5 million an hour? I can retire after 1 hour. How can I make $5 million an hour and be poor? Well, for example, if a loaf of bread costs $1 trillion, right? As it did in Weimar Germany in the 1920s, as it does in Zimbabwe today, any country which suffers massive hyperinflation of the money supply, you can make $100 million an hour and be poor. The key point regarding wages is not how high they are. The key point regarding wages is how high they are relative to prices. It's not how much you make that determines your living standards. It's how much you can buy with what you make. And real wages, what economists mean by real wages, is your income measured not in terms of how much money you make, but your income measured in terms of purchasing power. How much stuff does your money command in the marketplace? Because wealth, basic principle of economics, wealth is not money. Wealth is goods. Right? Wealth is stuff, if I can sound like George Carlin. You know, wealth is stuff. Wealth is food. It's housing. It's clothing. It's medical care. I mean, you can't live eat, or take as medicine a pile of dollar bills. You need consumer goods. And if you want to raise, the only way to raise an individual's income or a nation's income, or the income across the entire globe, the only way to do that is to raise real wages. And how do you do that? Well, this goes back to the basic principle of economics, right? The law of supply and demand. If the supply of X rises relative to demand for it, then the price of X will come down, right? If demand for X rises relative to supply, then the price of X will increase. And the one way to raise real wages is to enormously, immensely, gigantically increase the supply of consumer goods relative to demand. So for instance, the single most important factor in human life is food. And as Americans, we are proudly the fattest people of history, right? And I say that, you know, now being overweight has its own set of problems, I understand that. But it's not the same as having your 7-year-old daughter die of starvation, as happens all over the non-capitalist world today, and all throughout history in the non-capitalist world. So take food for example. You want food prices to be low so that people can afford to buy food. What you have to do is immensely increase the supply of food. You have to grow more food. You tremendously increase the supply of food relative to demand for food, which brings prices down and means real wages rise. This is the way you raise living standards. Now, we'll come back to this point later, but British real wages from the earliest days of industrial capitalism, contrary to all the Marxist propaganda that's spewed out by professors and universities across the country, British real wages, we know for sure, today after a century of debate by economic historians in the 20th century, British real wages show an average increase from starting in 1781, the very beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. From 1781 to 1851, British real wages showed an average increase in excess of 60% for farm workers, over 86% for blue-collar workers, and more than 140% for all workers, including white-collar ones. Now, one practical result, one tremendously beneficial practical result of this enormous rise in real income was a final end in Britain to the ages-old practice of child labor. Because now, mom and dad could make enough money to buy enough food and buy enough stuff to support their offspring without the need for the children to work. Child labor exists today all over the non-capitalist world, and only in the non-capitalist third world, because the means of production, the levels of production are so low that mom and dad's real wages are not sufficient to literally buy food for their children. The children's choice, just like in pre-industrial Europe, pre-industrial Britain, the children's choice is literally you work or you starve. Now in the United States, economic progress was even more dramatic. Capitalism and the technological industrial revolution reached their full fruition in the United States in the late 19th, turn of the 20th century period. Advances such as Cyrus McCormick's Reaper, Samuel Morse's telegraph, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, Thomas Edison's electric lighting system, Henry Ford's mass production of automobiles, the Wright brothers' airplane, and numerous other devices established America as the most progressive and wealthiest society of history. Per capita living standards in America doubled between 1790 and 1865, and then doubled again between 1865 and 1915. This at a time when the country absorbed millions of penniless immigrants from Ireland, Sicily, and East European Jews. America's extraordinary, unprecedented productivity, led by such giants of industry as Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Edward H. Harriman, James J. Hill, J.P. Morgan, et al., kept American output so far ahead of population growth that the country's high real wages and high living standards became legendary as early as the turn of the 20th century.